Japan had no cars, no engines, no factories, so how did it become home to the most trusted automaker on earth? This isn't just a business story. It's a story about obsession. About a boy who sketched machines instead of playing outside. About a man who slept in his factory, chasing an engine that refused to be born. About Japan, rising from war and ashes, one vehicle at a time. In the early 1900s, Japan had to import every single car. But within a few decades, it began exporting them to the world. What happened in between was one man's dream, and his name was Kiichiro Toyota. In this video, we follow his journey, from childhood curiosity to industrial revolution, from failure to the foundation of one of the most influential car companies in history. Let's go back to the beginning. Before there was Toyota, before there were even Japanese cars. Let's start with a simple question. Why are Japan's roads filled with Japanese cars? Section 1. Why do Japanese roads overflow with Japanese cars? Why do you almost never see a Ford or a BMW in Japan yet Toyotas are everywhere? It's not just about nationalism or convenience. The answer goes deeper than you think. Over 90% of cars in Japan are Japanese made. They come from brands like Toyota, Honda, Nissan, and Subaru. And these cars dominate not just Japan but the global market too. But here's the twist: go back a century, and Japan didn't even make cars. No engines, no factories, no experience. Japan relied entirely on imports from Europe and America. In fact, when the first cars appeared on Japanese roads, people were stunned. They had never seen a machine move without horses or oxen. The sound, the speed, the smell of oil was almost alien. So how did a country with zero car-making history become the home of Toyota? How did Japan go from importer to innovator? The story starts with a boy who wasn't interested in playing outside, but in sketching machines. A boy who was born into a family of inventors, but wanted to build something entirely his own. His name was Kiichiro Toyota, and the journey from that curious child to the father of Japan's car revolution? It begins right here. Section 2. The boy who loved machines. Young Kiichiro's secret obsession. Some kids dreamed of being heroes. Kiichiro Toyota dreamed of gears, engines, and steel. Even as a boy, he was different. While other children played in the fields, Kiichiro would sneak into his father's factory. There, surrounded by machines, he felt more alive than anywhere else. His father, Shouldnt Toyota, was already famous in Japan. He had invented the automatic loom, a machine that revolutionized Japan's textile industry. But young Kiichiro wasn't interested in fabric. He would sit quietly for hours, sketching the outlines of gears and belts. He wasn't told to do it. He just wanted to. There's a Japanese saying, "Keiru no ko wa keiru." The child of a frog is a frog. In other words, talent runs in the family. But Kiichiro didn't want to be a copy of his father. He wanted to make something new, something that moved, something that roared. At school, he excelled not just in science, but in discipline. Eventually, he entered Tokyo Imperial University, Japan's most prestigious school, to study mechanical engineering. But even there, he never lost that quiet obsession. Machines still whispered to him. Every gear had a voice, every engine, a dream. And even though his father hoped he'd take over the textile business, Kiichiro's heart was already moving in another direction. Not looms, not threads, but something faster, something noisier, something that could take Japan into the future. And that future would be made of metal, fuel, and wheels. Section 3. Born into innovation. The legacy of Shouldnt Toyota. Before Toyota was a car company, it was a loom company. And before there was Kiichiro, there was his father Shouldnt Toyota. Shouldnt was not just an inventor. He was Japan's king of invention. In the late 1800s, he changed Japan's future by creating the automatic power loom, a machine that wove fabric without human hands. It may sound simple now, but back then, it was revolutionary. His invention turned Japan into a textile superpower, and his company Toyota Automatic Loom Works became one of the most important in the country. Sakichi wasn't born into wealth. He was a carpenter's son, born in rural Shizuoka. But he believed in something powerful, that Japan could rise through technology, not through war, not through conquest, but through tools, through machines, through skill. He spent his life creating machines that helped people work better. And when he succeeded, he didn't just enjoy the fame. He reinvested in people, engineers, researchers, tinkerers. To him, invention wasn't just about making something new. It was about lifting up a whole nation. And that spirit of building for the future was what he hoped to pass on to his son. But he didn't want Kiichiro to become just another machine builder. He wanted him to lead, to think like an owner, to understand not just gears but people, money, and responsibility. That's why, when Kiichiro graduated from Tokyo Imperial University, his father didn't put him in the lab, he put him in the office. But that decision would not go as planned. Section 4: The earthquake that changed everything. Cars versus chaos. What makes a nation realize it needs cars? Sometimes, it takes a disaster. In 1923, Japan was struck by one of the most devastating earthquakes in its history. The Great Kanto earthquake. Buildings collapsed, fires spread, trains stopped, roads cracked. Tokyo was paralyzed. People tried to escape, to find family, to carry supplies. But the entire transportation system had broken down, except for one thing: cars. Imported American cars were suddenly everywhere, racing down broken streets, delivering food, medicine, and hope. They became lifelines, not luxury. People who once thought cars were just toys for the rich saw them now as tools of survival. And Kiichiro Toyota saw something else. He saw a country in pain, saved not by tradition, but by technology. He saw that Japan couldn't rely forever on imported machines. What if America stopped selling? What if disaster struck again? Japan needed its own cars, its own industry, its own future. For Kiichiro, the earthquake wasn't just a tragedy, it was a turning point. That day, he stopped seeing cars as just machines. He started seeing them as a mission. And even though Japan had no car factories, no engine specialists, and almost no experience, Kiichiro decided one thing: he would build a car with Japanese hands, for Japanese roads. Section 5: A Japanese man in Detroit. What Kiichiro learned in America. In 1929, Kiichiro Toyota boarded a ship bound for America. Officially, it was to negotiate a patent deal for textile machinery. But deep down, he had a different goal. He wanted to see cars, to feel them, to understand how they were made. Not just by hands, but by systems. He visited the factories of Ford and General Motors. And what he saw left him speechless. Giant assembly lines, engines rolling out by the thousands. Precision, speed, efficiency. It was industrial poetry, a symphony of moving parts. Japan, in comparison, was still using hand tools. Work was slow, delicate, careful. In Detroit, machines moved like armies. Unstoppable, ruthless, beautiful. Kiichiro was stunned and inspired. He asked himself, if they can do this, why can't we? He didn't feel inferior. He felt motivated. But he also saw something else. America had scale, but it didn't have soul. Cars were products, fast, cheap, disposable. But in Japan, things were different. Craftsmanship mattered. Pride mattered. What if he could combine the two? Western speed with Japanese spirit. Mass production with human touch. That idea stayed with him. It never left. So when he returned to Japan, he didn't just bring back notes and diagrams. He brought back a fire. A new mission. To build a car that wasn't just efficient, but meaningful. A car made by Japanese hands. For Japanese hearts. Section 6: Building cars from zero with no blueprint, no experience. Here's a question. Could your country build a car from scratch if it had never built one before? No manuals, no parts, no experts. That was Japan in the 1930s. While America had Detroit, Japan had rice fields, while Ford had assembly lines. Kiichiro Toyota had only a dream, but he didn't wait for the perfect time. He started anyway. He gathered engineers. Some were friends from university. Others had worked in aircraft or factories. None had built a car. Their first step? Buy an American car. Take it apart. Study every bolt, screw, and pipe. Then try to build it again. From memory. It was reverse engineering. Trial and error. Guesswork and grit. Engines exploded. Parts failed. Sand molds for cylinders crumbled. But still they kept going. Kiichiro slept in the factory. He didn't go home. He believed that every failure was a lesson. And here's what's fascinating. In the West, failure often means stop. In Japan, it can mean keep going. What do you think? Is failure something to avoid? Or something to embrace? Kiichiro believed in the second. He told his team, "We get our hands dirty. Because clean hands don't invent anything." His engineers were exhausted. Some wanted to quit, but his passion pulled them forward. They weren't just building a car. They were building possibility. For Japan. For the future. And it all started with nothing. Section 7 Madness or Genius? The engine that refused to be born. How long would you keep going? If your machine failed 100 times? What if it exploded? What if it nearly blinded your team? Would you stop? Or would you call it progress? Kiichiro Toyota didn't stop. The hardest part of building a car wasn't the wheels. It wasn't the frame. It was the heart, the engine. And this engine refused to be born. The sand molds for the cylinders kept collapsing. The pistons wouldn't fit. Metal cracked. Nothing worked. Every night, the team would try a new formula, a new technique, a new prayer. And every morning, another failure. Some engineers began to whisper, "This is madness." Others thought it was a waste of time. Some even walked away. But Kiichiro stayed. He didn't just lead with ideas. He led with sweat. He worked beside his team. His hands covered in oil. His eyes bloodshot from no sleep. He believed something the others had forgotten. That innovation isn't born in comfort. It's born in chaos. One night, after hundreds of failures, something changed. A piston moved. A crankshaft turned. And for the first time, the engine roared. Kiichiro shouted. His team cried. They hadn't just built a machine. They had created a heartbeat. Not for one car, but for Japan's future. Section 8 The factory that shouldn't exist but did. A car needs a factory. But factories need money. And Kiichiro Toyota had none. No investors. No government backing. No guarantee of success. All he had was belief. After the engine was born, Kiichiro knew they couldn't keep building cars by hand. He needed a real factory. One that could mass-produce vehicles at scale. But where? He found a quiet town called Kuromo. Far from Tokyo. Surrounded by rice fields, cheap land, open skies, and no one who believed in cars. Local leaders said, "A factory? Out here?" Bankers said, "Where's your market?" Even family said, "Is this really worth it?" Kiichiro didn't flinch. He said, "I don't just want to build cars. I want to build Japan's future." And something incredible happened. His younger sister's husband, who ran the textile company, stood up and said, "I'll back you." Then the mayor of Kuromo spoke. "This town needs hope. Let's give people jobs. We'll help." A plan that should have died came alive. The land was purchased. The foundation was laid. And in 1937, Toyota Motor Corporation was born. It wasn't just steel and walls. It was a declaration that Japan would not just consume cars. It would create them. And that factory, built on rice fields and risk, would change the world. Section 9 War, bombings, and burned dreams. But he stood up again. Just as the dream was coming alive, war began. Japan entered World War II. And like all major factories, Toyota was ordered to stop making passenger cars. Instead, they had to build trucks for the military. Engines meant for peace were now used for war. Steel became scarce. Rubber was rationed. Skilled engineers were sent to the battlefield. And then, in 1945, the factory was bombed. Flames consumed the walls. Smoke covered the sky. Years of hope reduced to ashes. Kiichiro was devastated, not just because of the damage, but because of the purpose he had lost. He never wanted to build machines for destruction. He wanted to move families, connect towns, give people freedom. After the war, Japan was broken. Cities were ruined. People were starving. But in the ruins, Kiichiro stood again. He gathered what little was left. A few tools, a few men, and he said something simple. Let's try again. There were no orders, no investors, no guarantees, but there was belief, and belief was enough. Piece by piece, they rebuilt. First the tools, then the engines, then the cars. Not for the military, not for power, but for the people of Japan. Because dreams don't die in fire. Not if someone has the courage to rebuild them. Section 10. His crown. His legacy, a future he never saw. In 1955, Japan celebrated the birth of a car. It was called the Toyopet Crown, the nation's first truly mass-produced passenger car. It was elegant, reliable, and it was built entirely in Japan. But the man who had made it possible, Kiichiro Toyota, never saw it. He had passed away 3 years earlier, at the age of just 57. Overworked, undervalued, and in some circles still doubted. But his dream had bloomed. Even without him, the crown wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of resilience, of vision, of a country that had risen from war and found its voice through engineering. And Kiichiro's voice still echoes in every factory line, in every blueprint, in every decision to do what others say is impossible. His engineers carried on his mission. They perfected quality. They eliminated waste. They created the just-in-time system, a method now studied around the world. And today, Toyota is more than a car company. It's a global symbol of precision and purpose. But its roots? They are deeply personal. A boy who sketched gears in silence. A man who failed 100 times, but stood back up 101. He never saw the crown, but he gave Japan something greater. A way forward, built not on power, but on persistence. This is just one example of Japan's unique way of thinking. Do people in your country do the same, or is it completely different? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. And if you like this, subscribe for a new video every day. See you tomorrow at the same time.